In the fourth round of the FIDE Chess.com Grand Swiss 2021, Nihal Sarin started off with 2.5 points out of 3. He was playing on board number 2 against Pankratov Pavel. Both have roughly around the same rating, and Pankratov stopped everyone by sacrificing his bishop on h2. Now this was not the best of ideas, because after queen h4, king g1, rook f6, it looked like a dangerous attack with the rook coming in and threatening checkmate here. Nihal played his pawn to f3, rook h6, queen e1, and eventually the game ended in a perpetual check, and the point was split in 20 moves. But what Nihal missed is that instead of f3 here, he could have played his pawn to f4. And the subtle point is that after rook h6 is a brilliant defensive move. Try to pause the video and think, what would you play here? The move is knight f3, and this move attacks the queen, and after e takes f3, bishop f3, if you give a check, now my king is running away to safety, and Nihal could have had a great position. And maybe, who knows, he would have moved to 3.5, leading with Alireza. For now, he's on 3 points, which is also a very good score. Moving on to the next game, where Fedoseev versus Gukesh. And in this game, something truly spectacular was this position, where Gukesh realized that he has to strike in the center with the move d5, and this is a very nice move, giving up a pawn, because after knight d5, queen d5, pawn d5, both of his bishops are beautifully positioned, and the game became very complicated. In fact, Fedoseev got an advantage at some point, but here instead of playing rook b7, he went knight e7, and very quickly it was Gukesh who was in driver's seat after check and picking up the c2 pawn. Like here, Gukesh had to play a move like h6 or h5, and he was clearly better, but he went king g8, and very soon the game ended in a draw because of perpetual check. So that was how Gukesh drew against Fedoseev, a fighting game and a very interesting battle. Shashi Kiran versus Artemiev didn't have too many fireworks. It was a reverse Sicilian here, and after this it turned out that black was doing pretty okay. White had a small edge, but Shashi Kiran managed to play very solidly. And I think this tournament is going well for Shashi Kiran as of now. He is currently on 2.5 out of 4 with 1 victory and 3 draws. So no losses until now for the experienced Indian player. The next game that we are going to look at is between Samuel Savian and Pragnananda. This game was quite topsy-turvy in the sense that Prag managed to get a fine position out of the opening, but very soon he went wrong with queen f6, and then Savian started to push here. The c6 pawn was weak and Prag was in big trouble, but Savian did not capture this pawn on multiple occasions, which would have given him a better position. Instead, he allowed Pragnananda to fight back in the game, and then at many crucial moments, I think Prag had good chances, but eventually the game went towards equality. However, in such positions, these two pawns were very dangerous, and Savian found this beautiful maneuver with rook f4, attacking the knight. And what he had seen is that after d2, he has this move rook e4. I think Prag might have missed this, because after this, he lost the d2 pawn and he blundered here with rook a8. Rook d4 would have still kept the game going, but after rook a8, he was in a very difficult situation. Here, once again, knight d3 would have kept the game going, because after takes, rook c3, black is still quite active, and with h3 he's weaving a mating net against the white king. But once he went rook c3, knight d2, it was all over, and in the end the b pawn actually queened and Pragnananda lost the game, which is quite a blow, because Prag was playing well in this tournament, and losing this game does impact his chances. Mousesian against Harikrishna started out as an equal position, and it seemed like the game would end in a draw. Moving the rook away to a6 would have ensured that the game would have been equal and drawn. But Mousesian blundered with rook d8, and Harikrishna, who is known for his endgame skills, gave a check, pushed the king away, and then rook c8, and then exchanged. And what happened in this endgame is that the d pawn is very strong, and Harikrishna won the entire bishop for that pawn. As we can see here, the king entered, And Hari was, of course, in his element, not botching up the win. He won the bishop and eventually he won the endgame. Very good play by Hari. Sanan Sujiro versus Arjun Erigesi was a Petrov, and here it was all theory until move 21, it seems. Like both players were very well prepared. Somewhere around here, the first new move was played, and it seems like black got into a passive position, and even trying to win this pawn did not help. Here, knight c5 was a nice tactic, and knight f6 was the final move that, black could have kept fighting on. Once he went king g8, it was all over. d6. The d-pawn is tremendously strong, and here queen f8 and Arjun lost. So two youngsters losing their games today, Arjun and Prag. And then we move to the next Indian player here, Surya Ganguly. I think a very interesting opening variation. After this, Jordan played a new idea here, which is maybe his innovation, c5. And here Surya thought for 16 minutes as to should he take with the pawn or the bishop. It has never been played before. He took with the bishop, which was logical, but what happened was he landed in a passive position. Somewhere, even here, a move like g4 was very powerful. Such is the cramped nature of black's position. But Jordan played very naturally. And if you look at this game, you will realize that actually Surya hardly got a chance to unravel. His position was so passive that after giving up the exchange as well, Jordan entered the position, and this was all over. Rook d3 with the threat of check, king e7, rook takes d7 and queen e8. There was nothing to be done. Surya resigned. Maxim Matlakov versus Raunak Sadhwani proved to be a very, very equalish game and well played game by Raunak. Actually, he did not put a foot wrong, and to get a solid draw against a player of Matlakov's caliber is a very good result. So here this was drawn at this point. So a good result for Raunak. Setu Raman against Boris Gelfand once again was a theoretical slugfest, and Boris Gelfand played knight g4, Setu took on c6. But what is interesting is that Boris knew that this position is not so bad for him, while Setu felt white is slightly better, which is true, but the opposite colored bishops and this overall nature of the position ensured that the game ended in a draw. Last but not the least, in the open section, we had Adhiban, who is perhaps going through one of his worst periods right now. Over here, after g3, Adhiban had a nice position out of the opening. He had to play b4. He played the Sicilian classical. I don't think he plays this opening too often. He went queen c5, and after bishop h3, knight e2. Already white was pressing because knight is coming to f4, e6 is weak, and this is the kind of positions that black has to be careful about. In the end, it was still quite complicated because you had many pieces on the board, but the moment Adhiban pushed e5, Jonas found a great move. Try to think if you can find it here. It was to take queen takes c8, and within couple of moves everything was exchanged, all pieces on the board, and in this opposite colored bishop endgame, Adhiban lost without a fight because his position is very difficult. These two central pawns are very strong, and that's how things panned out in the open segment. Going to the women's segment, Harika played her offbeat line in the Rui Lopez and got kind of an equalish position, and she did sacrifice a pawn for compensation here, and she got plenty of it, and in the end she managed to hold it. It was not a very, very interesting game, but white was pushing with the extra pawn, but Harika had counterplay, and that's how in the end it ended in a draw in a rook end game where both players agreed. The very, very surprising game, and I think today there were two surprises in the women's section. One was Padmini Raut versus Alina Kashlinskaya, because Padmini firstly played c3 here, giving up a pawn, knight takes d3. Very nice idea with queen c2, setting up a discovery against the black king. And then after f5, here queen e4. White has tremendous control on the light squares, if you notice. And Padmini was clearly better. She had some brilliant ideas like bishop g5, h5, knight g5 in the position. She went h4. Here there was also bishop takes h6, bishop h6, queen g6. I mean, there were so many good opportunities for her, but she played very well even here. and managed to get a totally winning position. Alina was like, I have literally no chances, so let me sack a rook. And if Padmini had taken here, then after queen f7 and found this brilliant move knight f5, which is not easy, because queen e6 just loses to knight e7, queen e7 and queen g6 is already over with the bishop entering into the attack. And otherwise, if you play like queen f5, then I can just take, and it's material equality with this strong b7 pawn, which white is winning. Here rook f2, Padmini blundered with knight d5. This just changed the position 360 degrees or 180 degrees. King f7, rook f6 check, and here king f6 would have finished the game, but she took with the rook, giving another chance to Padmini because there is a mate on f1, so she had to block with knight f5, but in her time pressure she played c4, and after king e7, rook g6, it was all but over. Vantika Agrawal, who has been playing really well in this event, got a great position in her game against Anna Sargsyan from Armenia. And if you look at this position, black is totally dominating here. Like, black has the knight beautifully placed, bishop is well placed, the rooks are excellently placed, but somehow she agreed to a repetition, which is very surprising, and the game ended in a draw. Vaishali played, I think, a great game. In fact, she didn't really have a big fight today because she got a position where she slowly and steadily outplayed her opponent. And in fact, the key moment came when her opponent played rook d8, queen c4 and b5, when there are threats of knight e7 in the air when the knight moves. And that's the reason why here she won material, she has a protected passer, and she went on to win the game. The last game, Divya Deshmukh fought like a lion in this game. She was worse in majority of the part of this game. She didn't have a great position. She managed to fight really well, and in the end, it seemed like she was under some lot of pressure, but she managed to hold Sophie Millet to a draw here. But I mean, bishop d4 ke jagah, if rook d4, this would already have given black a winning advantage here, but somehow Sophie Millet couldn't play the best moves. Divya managed to win here. Knight g3, king h2 and queen f4 would have been fatal, but she went rook g5, and this gave her the chance to go into a pawn down rook end game, which she handled very well. So this is how all the 15 games ended. We didn't have too many victories today. Harikrishna has made a strong comeback in the event, and apart from that, there were no real wins today. Vaishali won her game. It would be interesting to see who will continue playing well. Will Nihal, who is 3 out of 4, manage to continue his form? For now, this was the roundup.